the point is, it's been 2 weeks, and this is like still like a conversation that we can bring to the forefront
but
of the nation.
This was we're done with it now, though. We're done. We're done. The riots are done. The protests are done. There's no more talking now. This was the most that happened. Hey, what's up?
Hi. I'm kind of scared, not gonna lie.
Good. You should be. I'm super ready to go. Okay, hey, what's up? We'll probably largely agree, I think, or we're going to disagree on some things and we're going to scream at each other over them.
Yeah, I don't know. I feel like, I don't know. I feel like I usually have like these positions that aren't radical, but then it goes like down to like a line of questioning, and then it makes it seem like much more radical than what I was like trying to get across, or the idea I was trying to get across. And then I'm like I did not present that in the way I wanted to, and then I lose. So,
sure.
Yeah. Okay. I don't think there's much to disagree on here. I mean, when it comes to like defunding the police, you can argue like it's not like the best slogan, but at the end of the day, like if it's just a concept of, hey, you know what, like police funding, it seems like it's not being used appropriately, or not being used to the extent that it should be if we're buying like military grade weapons, but people are not using it like for de-escalation training or aren't properly like de-escalating their police departments. So it makes like much more sense to
just take all their money away, so they definitely don't have the money for de-escalation, or take any of their money away, so they don't have any money for like de-escalation training. Like, it doesn't.
Well, here I'll ask you a simple question, right? Let's say the local legislator is like, hey, you know what? We're gonna give you these funds, and it has to go to de-escalation training or body cams or something like that, right? And let's say the police, for whatever reason, choose not to do it, right? They get the money and they're like, that, like, we're not going to use it for that. Then what are you going to do? What's going to happen?
You get a new chief of police so that the funds are allocated appropriately.
Okay, and what if the next like chief of police like chooses not to do that? Or what if
you elect another one? I guess you just keep going.
Yeah, exactly. So it doesn't seem like a very efficient system.
No, that's super efficient. This is like saying, what if we allocate funds to our schools to do a better job, and then they don't? And then we keep allocating funds they don't. At some point, we just need to defund the schools because they're wasting our taxpayer money.
No. The point is that there should be like an oversight committee that is the one who decides like who actually allocates the funds, right? That seems to be like a much more efficient way of doing this.
Yeah, that's what we have. They're called mayors, right? The mayor nominates the chief of police, at least in LA. I think that's pretty normal in most cities, that the mayor is the one that does these big nominations or whatever, and then the city legislator votes them in.
Yeah, but the whole idea is like, okay, I'm trying to think about a word this the best way. It might take a while to realize, like, hey, these resources aren't being allocated the way they're supposed to be, for a variety of reasons, right?
I think they are being allocated how they're supposed to be, though. Go ahead.
So unless if, like, the mayor is constantly, like, on the chief of police's ass, which, you know, maybe you can make that argument that, oh, yeah, that's what the mayor, like, it's a problem with the mayor. They should be more on top of the chief of police's ass. But I would say, like, hey, I'm pretty sure mayors have responsibilities other than the police. Like,
the police is one of the huge responsibilities. If you go to, like, Chicago or Atlanta or Baltimore, the mayor and the police chief, why do you think that, like, city unions, like, are so big when it comes to re-election times for the mayors? Like, these guys are super close to each other, of course.
Yeah, I know they're close to each other, but I'm saying that mayors have like responsibilities beyond the police chief. Though the police chief is like
sure,
a big
I understand.
That.
Yeah, I understand, but one of their big responsibilities literally is the police. Like that's one of the huge things that like the mayor's office is like in charge of. It's like being in line with like the police department and making sure that everybody is like cool with each other. Because
yeah, sure, I'm not denying that. I'm just I guess like the statement or the claim that I'm making in general is that to have a process that maybe like alleviate some pressure off the mayor. Or, you know, you just have, like, more police oversight in general, right? Like, an oversight committee doesn't have to just do with funds. It can also do with, like, making sure that these cases are properly, like, brought to trial. Or making sure that, like, I guess, like, in general, that police are held accountable. It seems to, I guess, for me, personally, make much more sense to reallocate some funds to a separate oversight, maybe, like, civilian committee that has to do with, like, putting, like, police in line, basically.
Yeah, but like a separate oversight committee, that's way different than defund the police, right? I think third-party oversight is like really important, of course.
The idea then becomes like, where are we going to get the funds for a committee like this? Unless if you rather advocate for like raising taxes or cutting it like from other, from other programs.
I mean, how the funds are raised, I'm not sure. I don't know why defund the police. It just doesn't. Well, I don't think that logically follows. Like, if you want more services for the police force, then you're going to have to raise more tax money for it. Like, that's just the reality of how budgets work, right? If you want like body cams on police and everything, you're going to have to raise more money for it. You can't just cut that money from anywhere. You're asking them to do more and more and more. If you want to increase training for police, you're going to need more money for it, right?
Well, the idea is that I'm for like eventual, like, okay, like let's raise the budget, or how do you call it? Let's put more money for body cams or things like that. But the idea is just like, okay, give it to like a separate third party committee that is able to allocate those funds better. Because like so far, police have had the funds to decide or to choose to like, hey, you know what, we should spend this on like de-escalation training, but instead they have chosen to spend it on military grade weapons.
So police aren't just like buying military. First of all, they get a lot of military grade weapons, I'm pretty sure, for free from the federal government. But this idea that like,
there's a special contract that like I remember
the idea that the police are just like, well, we could do body cams or we could do like the reason why there's no pressure for any of this is because people just don't vote in local elections. That's why the police don't do anything. It's not because there's like a failure in a third party to hold them accountable. Although I think when it comes to prosecuting police crimes, I think third parties are really good. They shouldn't work through the same system that they work through with their like normal caseloads. Of course, that's obviously true. But the idea that like the police are trying to be held accountable, but for some reason nobody can do it is just not true. The reality is that police just aren't held accountable because nobody votes on police issues. It's just not a thing that people tend to care about who actually go and vote.
There was, I guess this goes back to our like last conversation, which I was like kind of tipsy or drunk on.
Sure.
So obviously, I'm never going to deny that people should vote. Obviously, like that, it's just basic game theory. You should go out and vote, even if you think like, oh, they're not going to really change anything. You should still go out and vote because, again, like basic game theory, you either get the same that you have now, or you have a possibility of changing something, right? So why not? But at least like from my knowledge about many of these minority groups, the ones that tend to be like hit really hard by said police force, aren't a lot of them like really disenfranchised groups to begin with?
So
like,
the city that I'm most familiar with is LA, and it wouldn't surprise me. I'm pretty sure numbers are pretty similar in the rest of the country. It's about a 20% turnout for these local like municipal elections. That's not disenfranchisement. That's voter apathy. That's just people not voting.
Okay.
So you can't really say like, oh, well, we've tried voting, blah, blah, blah. Well, no, not really. Well, like people generally haven't. People don't vote in local elections because they're boring. They're not sexy like nationwide elections are.
Well, no, but not just that. But I guess like disenfranchisement doesn't just have to do with what was it? I'm trying to think about how to explain this clearly. If you are from a poor neighborhood, chances are you do not have like the education or the resources or maybe even the transportation to go to these places or to go where like these voting booths are and being able to like vote for it.
I understand and I agree with you that some like voter suppression-esque things can take place. Gerrymandering and all that is a problem. Not 20%. That's a lot of people that just aren't voting.
Okay, yeah, I'm not denying a lot of people aren't voting. I'm saying that you can't like completely take away the possibility that like, hey, like these are marginalized and oppressed groups to begin with, or groups that do not even like have like the basic knowledge to know like when does this vote happen, or like what are the exact details needed, or don't even have like the transportation to go to said place to
sure.
vote for
and I can
whatever.
Understand that, but then in that case, then our conversation shouldn't be about defunding the police. The conversation should be how do we mobilize voters.
Well, it could be both, right? It could be like, hey,
no, because it doesn't make sense to do like okay. It doesn't make sense to do the most radical suggestion if we haven't even tried basic level stuff. That doesn't make any sense.
The most radical suggestion would be abolishing the police.
Which is a hashtag that's used right alongside defund the police. And defund the police and abolish the police sound the same to any normal human being until you have to take a minute to explain what you actually mean because the slogan is so bad. Like,
okay, but... like I agree the slogan is, I guess, like not the best slogan, but the principle of like, hey, we should, I don't know, fine, let's not say defund the police then, redirect money from the police.
Sure, hashtag reform the police or something, sure.
Do you think that's still like a radical thing to do? Like, hey, you know what, like until we get more oversight or until we're able to, you know, I guess like pull out like the bumps in the road, we might as well try to form like a separate third committee that can like focalize like that.
The third committee, this is just like one part. Like getting oversight on the police is just these people wouldn't have oversight over how the budget and everything else is spent. That doesn't make any sense. The third party oversight is literally just for like prosecuting police crimes. Like that's not.
You can have one for prosecution, then you can also have one that's in charge of like putting funds for like police training.
No, why? What? That's what the chief of police is for. Why would we need? Why would we want?
The point is, then you're gonna say like, oh, you know what? Like even if you, how do you call it, the chief of police, you just got to replace them, and then to have like a person in that position that's going to be able to do that, and you just like keep doing it until you find a person in that position.
Well, you wouldn't keep doing it. You'd probably do this once or twice. Like people that get elected want to remain elected. They're not just going to ignore issues that people feel really strongly about. Like they're going to want to win re-elections.
There's something I was gonna say that has to do with that, but then it goes back to the whole. Oh, I know what I was gonna say. Okay, perfect. Do you think, I think I asked you this last time, but whatever. Do you think that the majority of like the responsibility of what's happening right now falls on non-voters, or do you think it falls within police chief and I guess like mayors and things like that?
I would say it falls on the voting system right now. Yeah, of course.
Okay. Okay. So yeah, I don't know how we're gonna get through this because I think it's like a different thing of values, right? Because
Well,
I
it's
think
not a
like
thing of
yeah,
values.
voters,
My side is just factually objection, like or objectively, like it's what should happen. Voters should do things that make it so that they get reelected. That should be the goal. You
well,
know.
duh, nobody is against
Yeah.
that. But the
So if
idea is
people that
that
are
like,
the
hey,
most bothered by police crimes and stuff don't vote, I wouldn't expect the mayor or the police chief to give a fuck about those people. Of course not. They shouldn't. They're not voting. Why should you Why would you focus on non-voters? It doesn't make any sense. The whole point of a democracy is to do things to get elected.
Wait. Okay, so this is why I say it's like a value thing, or at least like a different thing about like how we view responsibilities of those in charge. Because even though like the people in charge do have like a foremost like responsibility to their constituents, like I would argue that they have a responsibility to like the state as a whole, or to the general populace as a whole, including those that didn't vote for them, right? So like for example, I'm gonna use like Donald Trump. Even if I don't know, New York didn't vote for Donald Trump, or if these liberal countries and like cities didn't vote for him, I would claim that he still has a responsibility towards those people because of his like public position and power.
Okay, I mean you can say that, but then they're just going to get voted out when they ignore their constituents. So I mean, what you're talking about is just like a losing strategy for every single elected position.
Well, not necessarily, right? Because the whole idea is like, okay, if you're able to get into like a position of power, you're able to like campaign, or you're able to like increase like voter turnout with the little power you have if you like are able to, I guess, strategize correctly.
Yeah, but if you're expending all of the limited political capital that you have on issues that your voters don't care about, you're going to lose your election.
There was going to be something I was going to say. So do you think that like mayors would lose their elections right now if they decide to like institute more police reform?
100%, yeah, for sure. Depending on the direction they go, yeah, it's a real hot button issue for old people. Okay. And they're the ones that typically vote. So, for instance, I can use a personal example. In Nebraska, one of the things that I think it was one of our prior mayors or police chiefs campaigned really hard on was they did a big criminal justice reform where they could get people out early if they'd spent time well, so that we didn't have so many people crowding our prisons. One of these guys got out. They went and they raped and murdered like a mother of two or whatever, and I'm pretty sure he lost his next election on that single issue because the main people that go out and vote are old people that are scared of crime and shit. So, yeah, of course, like they're going to get fucked in their elections if the only thing they try to do is like reform prisons and make it easier on people in the prison system. If the only people that go out and vote are old people, yeah.
Okay, I have another question. I know you're saying like, oh no, it's not. What is it? It's not disenfranchisement. It's just not enough people are going out.
I'm sure there's a little disenfranchisement, sure. Go on.
I'm just not exactly sure what you mean by little. I guess like I would have to like find studies.
Exactly. As in, my guess would be that if people actually cared about voting, that 20% number would probably be a lot closer to like 70 or 80%, and maybe that disenchant. 100% for sure.
I don't know. I guess I have to search or something because when I think about it, I think like the only reason why you have like. This sounds super unrelated, but give me a second. The only reason why you have like protests going out right now, why you have people like on the streets, I think it's specifically because of like what's happened with Corona, with so many people unemployed, with so many people having like the time now to go out and protest. I think if we were like just living in our like day-to-day life and like what happened with George Floyd happened, I don't think people would be out like protesting the streets. I don't think they would have the time to do so.
Yeah, maybe for protesting, sure. But I'm pretty sure that, like, if people were... I mean, like, actually, I can actually just even prove what I'm saying right now. If you look at the difference in turnout between local elections and between nationwide elections, it's like more than twice as many people, sometimes 3 times as many people, vote in the actual like, nationwide elections. So like, and then if you look at like what happened under Obama, it was even more people and greater groups of minorities. So these people weren't being disenfranchised for the big sexy national elections. Like, do they only get disenfranchised in off years when we're not voting for president, or do they only get disenfranchised for local elections, or can they only get 1 day a year off, like every 4 years to vote, and not 2 or 3 days? I don't believe that.
I would absolutely argue that like it's a lot more, I guess, understanding to take like a couple of time like off of work to be able to go and vote during like a huge election that people in this country seem to like value much higher than to be like, hey boss, I'm going to take like an hour or so, or who knows, maybe even like longer, depending on like how long or how far away my polling station or booth is.
Yeah, I don't disagree with what you just said. Yeah, I don't disagree with what you just said, because they want to vote in the sexy national elections, but they don't care about the local ones. So they don't want to take the time off.
This is like, how do you call it? This is like a cultural thing that becomes like a kind of systematic thing in a way, right? If your
well,
boss
hold on.
is
There's severe. Okay, so we can call everything cultural and we can call everything systemic if we want. But there's differences between systemic voter apathy and systemic voter suppression. Those are two totally different things.
Whoa. Okay, do you think that your boss like giving you kind of like a hard time or like a stink eye or like not being like very friendly to you when you mentioned that you want to go take some time off of work to vote in a city election doesn't suppress voting of any kind?
I don't think that same boss is going to be so happy for you voting in the midterms and the presidential election, but is going to suddenly have a massive problem you voting in the city election. I don't believe that that's 20%. That's why we have 20% voter turnout. No, I don't believe that for even a half second.
I don't know what to say. I definitely think that like when it comes to a general or big election that the media has been like revving up for like a whole time in advance, that everybody's like really like excited for, that bosses are much more
so you think so your hypothesis is that bosses everywhere around America are watching the news, and the more hyped up an election is, the more likely they are to let their workers off to go vote, and that explains the wide discrepancies between midterm, local, and on-year voting?
Maybe not 100% of the discrepancies, but I wouldn't be surprised if it contributes like quite a bit.
Quantify this for me. What do you think quite a bit is?
I don't know. If I had to go from the top of my head, I think that if we as a nation put as much as much pressure in local and city elections as in Senate elections, we would definitely see like a 70% turnout or something like that. Like this is obviously like from the top of my head, but I mean, I would definitely say that, hey, yeah, the way that we culturally see elections definitely impacts how many people go and elect.
So in the November 2018 midterm elections, 115 million votes were cast for the House of Representative candidates. The turnout was 50%. In 2014, the turnout was 79.2 million voters. So there was a 45% increase from 2014 to 2018. You think that 45% increase, you think there's a big chunk of that where the bosses were just like, oh yeah, go vote during 2018 midterms?
Well, it's how do you call it? It's a combination of everything, right? It's people being
no. Yeah, but we're trying to my goal. What I'm trying to because you keep hiding everything. Oh well, it's a lot of stuff. It's different things. It's a lot of things. So
I can't just say it's one thing. But yeah, I definitely think like a big part of that is our cultural perception of like if this is important or not.
I agree with that, but that's way different than
from work to be able to vote.
Yeah, what you just said, the cultural perception. So what you're talking about is a voter apathy. That's way different than bosses across America are banding together to keep their employees from voting. Those are two fundamentally different things.
Okay, it's not like, how do you call it? It's a lot more nuanced than that. It's not like, oh, you're going to go to like a local election and like vote out of time of work, I'm going to fire you immediately right now. It's this whole idea of like, well, do you really have to do that? Is it really that important? And then a person themselves thinking, okay, it's a local election. Now I have to take like an hour or a bus or two to be able to get there. Like, is it really like that much of my time off?
I think that in 2018, if 115 million people were able to vote, I think that in 2014, I think 115 million people would have been able to vote. I don't think that there are this boss discrimination of voting is going around. I think it's just voter apathy.
Okay, I feel like you're okay. I'm trying to say like I think it's a combination of like voter apathy as well as pressures like from work. And from
sure, yeah, it can be, but I would say the voter apathy is like 95% of it. Maybe there are a few bosses that are like, do you really need to go vote on it? But I think the general thing is just like, midterms, who the fuck cares?
Yeah,
I think that's way more common.
Voter apathy isn't just, what is it?
Well, I hate to pull out like one example, but wasn't there a protest in Seattle 4 years ago where the names of all the protesters were made public and people looked up the voter registrations and it's like 1/8 of these people were even registered or had voted in the prior election? And these are people that don't have time to go out and protest. Does anybody have a link to that real quick so I would read that? Like... It just seems like voting in midterms just isn't sexy. People just don't like it as much. It's not as cool as voting for the president. And then local elections even worse.
That's what I'm saying. Like, how do you call it? Voter apathy is not just like, it's a result of like, okay, like, yeah, media focus on the election of perceived importance, but that also carries on to like other aspects of our life, right? It carries on to whether, should you actually take time off of work to do that? Should you actually take like time off of your day to go like
and we should be spending the answer should be and the answer should be yes. We should be telling people, we should take off, we should do this. Yes.
Yeah, which I'm not against. I definitely think that we should like focus on like getting more people out to vote.
Mm-hmm.
But I also think that if you are an official, your duty is not just to people who voted towards you, but also towards the general populace as a whole.
How can you make that argument to a guy that wants to get elected again? It's a democracy. How can you argue to him that you should ignore the people who voted for you?
No. It's the idea that, hey, you know what? Like these people, well, first of all, it's the idea that you should try to put like systems into place that allow more people to go out and vote, right? So, hey, you know what? If you're mayor, if you're whatever, then you should like focus like more city funds on getting people out to just vote, right? Or trying to like convince people that city elections are extremely important. So that's one thing, right? The whole idea of like, oh, more voters, like maybe they'll go out to you or whatever. And then like the second thing is, yeah, maybe I don't know how I like individually.
I think the
like,
problem, like people
beyond who just voted for
so
them.
it's
But
I don't think
think
it's just it's not just a matter of getting people to vote like by spending money on it though. This isn't a money solves thing. Like we've tried and tried and tried to mobilize young voters around the world. Nobody can do it. They couldn't do it in the UK. Bernie Sanders couldn't do it in the Democratic primaries. Like nobody can motivate young people to go into it. Just doesn't seem to be like maybe there are ways to do it, but it has to be a big like cultural shift. It's not just a matter of the mayor pushing money into it. Like it's not just a matter of like the mayor just needs to allocate more funds to voting and all of a sudden people are going to show up and vote in these boring local elections and midterms that they don't care as much about as the presidential election.
Well, how do you think? Well, there was something I was going to say. I definitely don't think there's a clear-cut answer to it, but I do think that small actions like these do contribute to an eventual cultural shift. I don't think it's like completely worthless to say like, hey, you know what? Like it doesn't seem like we could get any young voters to like turn out or people who didn't turn out before to turn out, so it's like a useless thing to do anyways.
The
like,
problem is that
the problem. I think okay. No, if I remember correctly, like yes, what I was gonna say, like a lot of young people in Michigan did go out and vote. They were completely eclipsed by older populations voting. But the point is that we actually saw like a rise in younger people voting there. And correct me if I'm wrong, I believe like Nevada as well. I did not check the other states. This is just like early on in the election. Oh, I guess Michigan was like midway, whatever. You know what I mean? It's this whole idea that like, hey, it's not something that's going to happen overnight. Like, it's not going to be something like you put a bunch of money in here and now you're going to have like a bunch more people go into elections. But this idea that if we keep like pushing the envelope more and more, we're eventually going to get like a cultural shift. I don't know any cultural shift that's happened like overnight.
It's not a matter of it happening overnight. It just doesn't usually happen from like the top down. It usually happens from the bottom up, right? If we look at things like gay marriage, like that was a domino effect. States started to legalize it and legalize it and legalize it until eventually we got a Supreme Court ruling on it. If we look at cannabis right now, we've got multiple states legalizing it. If you look at fucking even healthcare, maybe you've got California and fucking Romney Care and shit, like in different states that are kind of sort of starting to pick up. Like, like I don't think that a government can push a policy unless we do like a fundamental change. For instance, like mail-in voting might be a way to do it, but otherwise, yeah.
Voting a national holiday. These are all actions that we can take.
Sure, we can. Sure, and these are important, but these are way better than like defund the police in terms of fixing problems. Like the problem right now is that mayors are actually pretty accurately representing the people. It's just that not a lot of people are voting. So it feels like the focus should probably be on trying to mobilize voters rather than like.
Yeah, but the point is that even how do you call it? Like even if mayors like are accurately like representing the people who voted for them, which is like a small minority of people. In this scenario, because that's what's in their best interest. Oh, these people are going to go vote out again. Mm-hmm. They're going to go out and vote for me. It doesn't mean that what's happening right now is like right or okay.
Well,
like,
I mean, no, it's the system working as it's intended. Unless you're in favor of a dictatorship or some authoritarian regime, like in a democratic.
I'm in favor of a dictatorship, authoritarian regime.
Okay, well then I don't understand what your problem is, because it's like democratic rulers should rule in such a way or lead in such a way that they're going to like please their constituents so that they'll be voted in again. That's the whole point of a democratic system.
Yeah, like I'm not, how do you call it? Fuck what I was going to say. Like I'm not against that, but you can also say like, hey, you know what? Like even if these like specific actions like benefit you the most, personally, we can still say that you have like a larger duty to society that you have to like take into consideration. I know it's an argument that you're.
Hold on, I think what you're not. I think what's not being understood is that like you have limited things you can do in office. You can't do everything, right?
Obviously.
So if you've got a few issues that you're going to prioritize as the mayor, and your voter base is older, affluent white men, why would criminal justice ever be anywhere near the top of that list of things you need to worry about?
Yeah, which is why it makes sense for people to be what is it, protesting now and putting pressure now.
You're not putting any pressure though. The protests are doing nothing. They're going to pay. They'll pay.
Let me find like a whole list of like things that have been enacted because of the protests. Because I remember reading it the other day, which included like Minneapolis like talking about like reforming their police department. which included like how do you go? I think fuck. Give me one little.
Yeah, so Minneapolis, the epicenter of all the protests, might have done a little bit, sure, but if any real change is going to happen, it has to happen in the voter booth. Like some people have maybe considered about, oh, well, maybe we'll do this or maybe we'll do that, but there's not going to be any widespread systemic change until these are electorally popular positions. That's how everything in the American system has always been, and that's how it's always going to continue to be.
Well, fuck, there was something I was going to say. Like, that's not exactly, like, necessarily true, though, right? I mean, when we look at, let's say, like, the civil rights movement, when we look, like, at the suffragette movement, when we even look, like, at early, like, labor laws, a lot of these things were not passed, like, out of voting, which makes sense because a lot of these, like, groups were not able to vote to begin with. A lot of these things were passed because of, like, rioting or because of people, like, doing massive protests. So
yeah, but also these things also had, like, widespread support around the country as well.
Widespread support, but they were still like a minority. Like,
I don't think they were extreme minority positions. I don't think the Civil Rights Act.
They weren't. I wouldn't say like their extreme minority positions, like 10% or whatever, only believe in it, right? I would say that like, hey, like a big, like I guess like 40, 50, if I had to put a random number there, did agree with it. Like, you know, pretty evenly split. Like, what I would argue what we kind of have now with like Republicans and like Democrats. So I wouldn't make the argument that like, oh no, like protesting or direct action like never works. I would say like, yeah, like it does work. Like we have like points in history and time.
Okay, on one hand, Americans continue to support the Civil Rights Act of 1964, at least in principle, but are concerned about its scope and implementation. A Gallup poll in October 1964 reported that the public approved of the new law by nearly 2-1, 58% to 31%. And in April 1965, Gallup found a whopping 76% in favor of the then proposed equal rights voting law. These things had widespread... I think that people have this misunderstanding that, like, the Civil Rights Act happened, all these white people were all these racist, horrible people, and then out of nowhere, black people protested and they brought all the white people around. Bullshit. A lot of this happened hand in hand with a lot of white legislatures that also worked to like move through some of this legislation. It wasn't just black people that just came out and protested and everybody was like, oh shit, you're right. You should have the right to vote, I guess.
Wait a second. When you're talking about like widespread support, are you talking about like the nation as a whole, or are we talking about specifically voters? Because like,
voters. That's what I'm talking about. Voters.
Okay, send me that link, please. Because the whole idea is like, hey, you know what? Like a lot of these people who are black like couldn't fucking vote. Like, yeah, they could in theory, but then like in reality, I ended up having like grandfather clauses, you ended up having literacy tests, you ended up having a whole lot of shit that made it extremely hard to actually vote. Now, does that mean that there wasn't like widespread support? Like, no, like obviously like there were a lot of people in the civil rights movement that were fighting for these like minority rights, but this whole idea that like, oh, I guess like this is what I'm coming back to, right? The whole idea of like, oh, change starts from the bottom up. Yes and no at the same time. Yeah, it starts from the bottom up in the whole sense that like the more people you get out to protest, the more people you end up like writing to your legislators or like senators, the more likely you are to see a change. But this whole idea that like, oh no, like if we just like vote in like local city council like elections, like you're gonna see like an immediate change, that is something that if I would argue like historically, even when it comes to like segregation in specific, isn't necessarily true. You needed like a stronger government force on top to be like, no, we're literally going to like force you guys to desegregate.
Okay. Nothing will ever change in the United States unless you get people to vote differently. I don't know how else to say that. Like that's just a fact. If after all these protests, the voting levels remain the same, then all of this was a massive circle jerk waste of time of a bunch of white people running outside to feel good about themselves, and a bunch of black people that thought that protesting would help, but then they didn't go vote afterwards, so none of it mattered. Like that's the only takeaway from all of this. Like
if I can show you things that have, and obviously, okay, I hate when you're like saying like obviously like, oh, you know, if nobody votes then nothing's gonna change, because I agree with that. Like I think people should still go out and vote, but I know now I'm gonna have a million people say you don't think voting is important, so I'm just waiting for I don't know what you were gonna pull, because I just googled, I don't know if there was like a Twitter thread or like, so I'm seeing the Guardian article about what the George Floyd protests have achieved in just 2 weeks. So number one, we have Minneapolis commits to dismantling its police. I don't know what the fuck that means or what that's going to look like afterwards, and I don't think Minneapolis knows that, but we have that in Minneapolis, sure. We've got big reforms pledged in New York City, where de Blasio said he was going to redirect some of the NYPD's funding towards youth and social services. No idea how much, no idea what that's going to look like. I see Confederate statues toppled across the country. Big fucking deal. Reddit co-founder resigns to make room for a black candidate. Big fucking deal. A database has been set up to record police brutality. Any random person could do this, and it is just a random person. A lawyer and a mathematician. Big fucking deal. Like none of this matters. Like... Okay, I agree. This is not nearly enough of what
No,
we
no,
need.
it's not that this isn't nearly enough. It's that this is nothing.
Okay,
this is nothing.
You don't think like politicians like saying like, oh no, like, you know, I like this has like changed my mind, I'm going to like, or not saying this has changed my mind, like this pressure is making me think about doing this or this or this instead, that we should like implement like these national policies. Like, it's been 2 weeks, you can't expect like a whole shit lot of change in 2 weeks, but even things like this is better than nothing. That's what I'm trying to get at, right?
This might actually be, I'm going to use the lefty socialist acceleration argument, this might be worse than nothing, because the lip service actually like satisfies the people, and they think like, oh well, shit'll be good, we're good, we can put our fucking signs away and go home and be done with it.
I don't think people are satisfied yet, at least from what I've seen, right? Like,
I don't know, when I see threads and people talking about like, look at how much we've accomplished in 2 weeks, the reality is you've done absolutely fucking nothing. Nothing has been accomplished. Like,
I don't disagree with you that not enough has been accomplished.
No.
Right?
You're misunderstanding me for hyperbole. Literally nothing. Nothing has been done. A few pledges, like maybe Minneapolis reforming its police. This is not what we need. What we need is like a dramatic sweep across the nation of things like body cams, of an ending of like broken windows policing, of reclassification of drugs, of different use of force policies, of third party like arbitrators for police investigations. These are the things that actually matter. Not a couple pledges from a couple random fucking mayors.
I'm not fucking disagreeing with you. I agree with that. But I also think like, hey, you know what? Like if we wait until like next election cycle for this to happen, like I wonder how many more people, innocent people, are gonna get killed, or how many more people are gonna be caught in the crossfire. You might as well keep like escalating things until like somebody fucking passes things like that are more substantial. Like, you know, it doesn't have to be one or the other. It
sure,
doesn't have to be
I agree. I agree that both are good. We can, but people can't be delusional thinking that this part matters that much. Like, the most important part, and Obama stresses a million times, every elected leader stresses this, but it's kind of like a doctor telling you to like eat healthier and lose weight or whatever. At the end of the day, they can't really say that because nobody fucking listens. The thing is that at the end of the day, with no pressure from voters, there is not going to be any sort of long-term systemic change. There's going to be some lip service. I see you've linked me an article where no-knock warrants were banned in Louisville, Kentucky. Congratulations, I guess.
It's a small example, but the point is, it's been 2 weeks, and this is like still like a conversation that we can bring to the forefront of the nation.
We're done with it now, though. We're done. The riots are done. The protests are done. There's no more talking now. This was the most that happened. Like, it's not like we're gonna see a big wave of reform.
Okay. I guess like I just like I for me it's really hard to say like whether protests are done or not, because like again, I would agree that like huge media outlets are not reporting as much as they were doing last week. But then the question is that like, is that like news fatigue? Is that like, okay, like we already covered enough of this, like let's try to find like a different story? Like I don't want to bring this up because like I don't know if it's like cringy or not, but like the Seattle like capital autonomous like whole like this whole what is it, zone or whatever, Chaz or whatever, I think that's like really, I think it's strange. I don't really know much about it, but I think like that is obviously like, I guess, an end effect of continuing to like escalate riots, right? Or continuing to escalate protests.
Yeah, they'll have their little fun zone for like a week or two, and then they'll all go home. But like this isn't like the real.
I mean, but you're making like predictions, right? Which I don't blame you.
I'm sorry. Are you gonna challenge that and say, well, no, maybe this will be a new autonomous region existing in the United States?
Not. Destiny, I don't say these things. Oh my god, let me fucking finish. Right? Okay. The whole idea is that like, hey, you know what? Like, you can still continuously like have escalating protests, or you can continuously like try to like put these pressures on like the legislator and things like that. Even if like voting isn't like right around the corner, you can still put that fucking pressure on and hope for things to change, because it's not a 0 or 100 game. You can do both. You can focus on direct action. You can focus on going out on the streets and protesting. And you know what else you can focus on? On voting. Like this whole idea that like, oh no, like if you go out and like don't like, oh, if you don't vote or whatever, like all of this is useless. Hey, you know what? Like I agree up to a certain extent, but I don't think like small actions or small change should be completely swept under the rug. I think like even if it's the smallest thing, it still fucking counts for something.
Yeah, I guess. I mean, like, you can say that to, like, all the black people getting killed in the street. It was like, well, we did a small thing, I guess. Fuck you. Like, good luck in fucking hell, dog. Like, see you later, boy. We did. Like, didn't you hear in Louisville they banned no-knock warrants? Like, come on, dog. Like, good luck in prison. Like, what the fuck kind of bullshit answer is that? What the fuck? The goal at the end of the day should be widespread reform of American criminal justice systems. And the only way that happens is with people actually voting.
Nobody's fucking disagreeing with
that.
Okay,
well, then what are we arguing about?
I don't know. I'm not sure. I'm saying like, hey, both of these things matter. like we should focus on like police reform as a whole. We should also focus on like what we can do right now until like elections are along the way. That we shouldn't just like sit down at home and just wait until like the next election cycle comes. Like as long as we have like some sort of power, whether it be numbers or overwhelming a police force or whatever it can be, we should still do that. Like it doesn't have like you can still go out and fucking vote and you can still go out and protest. It doesn't have to be
yeah,
like
of course. I would never disagree with that. Yeah, of course you can do that.
But I don't know what we're arguing about.
I think that at the end of the day, the only thing that matters is voting. The most important thing that a protest can do, like what we saw in Georgia, is motivate people to go out and vote. I think Georgia had like 3 times the voter turnout, I think is what I remember reading. But like that's like the most important thing to do. People that are trying to discriminate voters by saying things like, we tried voting, it doesn't work, or people that are saying like voting doesn't matter or doesn't count for anything, like the most important thing that a protest or any type of activism could do is mobilize voters, is get people out to vote. If that happens, then we could see real change in America. But otherwise, just like expecting people to not like listen to people that vote for them, I don't think is like a realistic path forward. That's...
I agree with you on voting. I think maybe our main disagreement on is the impact that like riots or protests have, right? Because I don't think like...
Sure, like here...
Or maybe we don't even disagree on that.
This,
the whole idea...
Just this headline, right? Voter turnout soared in Georgia, despite massive primary day problems. Democrats cast close to 1 million votes in the Senate primary, more than triple the number in the 2016 primary.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, so it's not their bosses that are keeping them from voting. It's just voter apathy. People just don't care.
Well, if you also like read about like the things that were happening in Georgia, like there was a shit ton amount of like voter disenfranchisement as
and
well. And
even despite all of that, they cast triple the number of votes.
Yes.
300%. That's unbelievable. Like,
yes, that is a great accomplishment. But the point of the fact is that like, well, yeah, we should be like, hey, you know what? Like you're like chances are it's gonna be hard. Like disenfranchisement is gonna happen. You're gonna be like waiting out there for like a long amount of time, but it's worth it. It's worth it to get in a person that you believe is going to create change. So it's going to be hard, but it's fucking worth it. But I don't think it's like fair to be like, oh yeah, like look at all these people, they're just like being too like fucking lazy. Like it's something.
I'm not saying lazy. I said voter apathy. Those are 2 different things.
Okay, but the whole idea is like, oh yeah, okay. Well, no, not necessarily. I'm trying to think about how to phrase this. If you're apathetic, you do not care enough to like go out and vote, right?
Yeah, because people think voting doesn't matter. Yeah.
Yeah. Why do you think people are apathetic to begin with?
I don't know. Maybe they hear a lot from other people that voting doesn't matter because corporations run everything and because it's all about money and power. They hear some dumb shit like that enough. Maybe they feel like, well, what the fuck is the point of me going out to vote?
Yeah, or maybe sometimes people like go out and vote and they're like, holy shit, the line is like 7 hours long. I have to go back to my children, back to my work, back to like whatever responsibility I have.
And somehow in Georgia, all those children were just left at home alone while triple the numbers made it out to vote somehow. Or maybe there was a record number of babysitters available that day. Or maybe it was just voter apathy. And that's why people weren't voting before.
Or maybe it was a combination of like the protests that were happening, and I would argue, yeah, Corona does play a big deal in this. Okay, the idea that there's like, hey, like a lot of people that are now like unemployed who like previously like didn't have like this freedom to like go out and wait in line for hours now have that opened up.
What if we look at the massive difference in voter turnout between George Bush and like President Obama? Did those people just did they have time off work too? Or
whoa. Okay, wait. I thought, well, fuck, I'm getting confused again. I'm not saying that, again, like, was Georgia a local election, or was it like wait?
Georgia was for the representative election or whatever.
Okay, for Congress, right? Or am I wrong?
Yes,
like
for the Senate, yes.
Okay. Fuck, there's something I was gonna say. Yeah, so that's like a senatorial race as well, which I would argue has like more value held on to.
Doesn't matter. I'm not comparing it to other races. I'm comparing it to itself in the primary turnout, where the turnout was 1/3 of what it was this time.
Wait, but primaries are not the same thing as like general elections. Like primaries.
Yeah, I know. No, I'm not comparing it to other types of elections. I'm comparing it to itself. I don't.
Okay, you're saying more people came out and voted this year than last year.
Than the last cycle, yes.
Last cycles. Okay, yeah, but like I would argue that this is still like a different conversation to be had than like your local city council mayor.
Yeah, of course. But I'm just saying that like it doesn't seem like all this voter suppression is massively fucking the vote. It seems like there probably is some of that goes on and some voter shit that discourages some people from voting, but it seems like a lot of it is probably just voter apathy. Just people feel like that doesn't matter or their vote doesn't matter in local elections for whatever reason.
Well, yeah, a lot of people feel like their vote doesn't matter because their vote is like basically disenfranchised, and like,
well, their vote isn't disenfranchised. They disenfranchise themselves by not voting.
Well, it's an ongoing cycle, right?
No, it's just a one-ended cycle.
It's an ongoing cycle, right? Like look at how many more people it took to be able to like get anything like near, I would argue, like a fair election.
And now that we have it, a lot of people just don't vote.
The idea is that you need like a whole fucking like tsunami, right? Which is really hard to achieve. You can't like get mad at like individuals, or I guess you could, but I personally don't see like the effort of like getting mad at individuals who are like, okay, well, I tried voting like last election cycle, but the line was like incredibly long, like all the voting.
I don't think this is happening. You're describing like one authentic. What?
Oh, fuck. There was something I was gonna say. Like, we could read about like even this election cycle about like how many like fucking like voting machines were like out of line or weren't working.
Yes, and in Georgia, literally in the headline, despite massive primary problems, 3 times as many people voted.
Yes, but let's say, okay, yes, exactly. But let's say like the people, let's say it wasn't like 3 times, right? Let's say there was only like half amount of those people. Or like just a quarter fraction, or like the last election cycle. You can't suddenly be like, oh my god, like all these people are dumb if in the next election cycle they're not motivated to go vote because of what happened last time. Like I don't see any point in like getting angry at those people. I don't think that's going to like motivate them to go fucking vote more.
Well, I don't know how you motivate people to vote. That's a different. I'm not saying you should get angry at them and that motivates them to vote. I don't know if getting angry at anybody motivates.
What's the point of like focusing on like, oh, you know, it's just like voter apathy?
Oh, because if they don't vote, then nothing changes, and the system is hopeless.
Yeah, but there's a way that you can like, I guess like talk about. Maybe I'm just getting like too semantical here, right? But the whole idea of like, hey, you know what? Like, it's going to be hard. Like, disenfranchisement does happen. In fact, like you're one of the groups that's probably gonna get fucking disenfranchised, but that doesn't mean you should give up. And hey, you know what? It's still wrong what they're doing for you, like to you. Like, it's still not, like, an okay thing for them to do. It's not okay for them to, like, allow the blue wall of silence to still be held up. It's not okay for them to, like, not focus on, like, de-escalation training. Like, that's still not an okay thing to do. And you should vote because that's not okay.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that. Yeah, people should vote. I don't disagree with anything you said.
Okay. I guess that's it. I don't know. I don't know what else to say. Because I think we just agree. I don't know what we disagree about, I guess.
I don't know. Yeah, I think man, I hope people vote, okay? That's all I'm going to say.
Yeah, I don't blame you. I want people to vote also. Well, this is another thing I want to ask you, I guess. So you don't think like the riots after like Martin Luther King died, or like the suffragette riots, or even like labor riots, you don't think those like affected like legislators' decisions at all?
No, I think it does in a roundabout way, and that it motivates a lot of people to get out and start voting. It brings these issues to the forefront of like the American conscience, and then people are voting more based on these issues, which is going to cause legislators to change their mind, of course. I think that Trump is right. I think that all political discourse should be banned on YouTube and Twitch streams and Twitter. I think that these people aren't worthy of having political discussions.